Take out your phone, look at it for a second. There is a very real chance it was built by one family, not just a company, a family, one Korean family, a family so powerful that its businesses earn about a fifth of an entire nation's economy, a family whose money once helped bring down a president, and whose own heir went to prison for it. For more than a decade, this one family sold more phones than anyone alive on Earth. Not in America, not in China, not in Japan, in one small country. And it all traces back to a single man, a man who, in the summer of 1950, fled a burning city with a war at his back. A man who, years before that, sold dried fish and noodles out of a tiny shop. This is the story of that family. The name, Samsung, and it is not the story you think it is. Welcome to World's Richest. Every single day, we bring you one story like this. Real people, real fortunes, real empires, the way they were actually built, and the way they were nearly lost. If this is your first time here, do one small thing. Tap subscribe. It is completely free, and every episode gives you a story you have never quite heard before. First, let's look at the scale. Today, Samsung is not just a phone company. It is one of the largest companies on Earth. It makes the memory chips that sit inside phones, laptops, and machines all over the world. For nearly 20 years, it has been the #1 television brand on the planet. And for more than a decade, it sold more phones than any company alive. Its revenue alone equals about a fifth of South Korea's entire economy. The people there even have a name for it. They call it the Republic of Samsung, a company so big, so central, that the country itself cannot afford to let it fall. And all of it, every chip, every screen, every phone in a billion pockets, grew out of a small shop. A shop that sold dried fish, vegetables, and noodles, in a Korean town long before the war. So how does a story travel that far? From a box of noodles to the phone in your hand? For that, we have to go back, all the way back to 1910, to a wealthy family in a quiet Korean village. His name, Lee Byung-chul. He was born in 1910 in a village called Uiryong. And here is the first surprise. He was not poor. The Lee family were landowners. Wealthy, respected, the kind of family that owned the fields other men worked. Young Lee studied in Japan, at a famous university in Tokyo. He was meant to become a scholar, or an official. That was the path for a son of his class. But he left before finishing. He came home restless, a little bored, looking for something to build that was his own, and in 1938 he found it. In the city of Daegu, Lee Byung-chul opened a small trading company. He gave it a name, Samsung. In Korean, the word means 3 stars. It was not yet a phone. It was not yet a chip. It was a shop. Dried fish, seafood, fruit and vegetables, and noodles. His own brand of noodles sold in stamped wooden boxes. They outsold every rival mill in the city. Understand this, one of the biggest technology empires in the world began as a grocery and noodle business, run by one ambitious young man, with money to spend and something to prove. The business grew fast. Lee Byung-chul was a natural trader. He read markets, he read people. Within 10 years, he moved his base to the capital, to Seoul. And in 1948, he founded a new trading company there. It boomed. By 1950, Samsung was one of the 10 largest trading companies in all of Korea. Lee Byung-chul had done it. He was rich, he was respected, he had built an empire out of trade. And then, in a single week, it was gone. In June of 1950, war came. The army of North Korea crossed the border, and it swept south toward Seoul. Within days, the capital fell. Lee Byung-chul's business, his warehouses, his stock, his headquarters, sat inside a city now held by an invading army. He lost his Seoul base almost overnight, and like millions of others, he had to run south, away from the fighting, with whatever he could carry. Picture it, a rich man, a successful man, walking south on a broken road, in a river of frightened refugees. Everything he had built in the capital, behind him, in enemy hands. What did he have left? Here is the answer. Not nothing. One foothold survived. A brewery he owned in the south kept running through the war. It kept a little money flowing, so Lee Byung-chul did not fall all the way to zero, but he did have to start again. He reached the port city of Busan in January of 1951, and Busan, at that exact moment, was the one place in Korea that was booming, because the war had brought something with it. American troops, American ships, American money, endless supplies pouring through the port. And a sharp trader could get very rich very fast. Lee Byung-chul did. But this time, he saw something deeper. Trading was fragile. War could take it away in a single morning. He had just learned that the hardest way possible. Real power was not in buying and selling. It was in making, in owning the factory floor itself. So in 1953, Lee Byung-chul built Korea's first private sugar refinery, his first real factory. A year later, he built the country's largest wool mill, and he poured the profits into more and more and more. He was no longer just a trader, he was building an industrial empire, and it ran on one simple idea. Do not just sell it, own it, make it yourself, and make it better than anyone else. That single idea would build everything that came after. Through the 1960s, Samsung became one of the biggest companies in all of Korea. And then, in 1969, Lee Byung-chul made the move that would one day change the world. He founded a new company, Samsung Electronics. Its very first product, in 1970, was a small black and white television. Just 45 employees, almost no sales. A tiny, quiet start. But a start. No one watching that little assembly line, hand-building boxy television sets under the lights could have guessed what it would one day become. From a noodle shop, to a sugar refinery, to an electronics company, it was an extraordinary life. Lee Byung-chul had built something that would outlive him. And in 1987, at the age of 77, he died. Now, that could be the end of the story. A rags-to-riches founder. A quiet death, a great empire left behind. But it is not the end, because the man who would turn that little television company into the maker of the phone in your hand had not even taken over yet. This was only the beginning. His name, Lee Kun-hee, the founder's third son. 2 weeks after his father's death, he became the chairman of Samsung. He inherited a giant. But Lee Kun-hee looked at what he had inherited, and he did not like it. Yes, Samsung was big. It made a great many things. Cheap things. High volume, low price, but second rate. It copied the Japanese. It trailed far behind Sony. Lee Kun-hee said his own company was doomed to forever remain second, or second and a half rate, and that thought ate at him. A cheap copycat, stuck forever in second place. He decided to change it, but not with a new product, not with a new factory. He decided to change the entire company, its habits, its thinking, its soul. And that raises a question. How do you change the soul of a giant? In June of 1993, Lee Kun-hee did something strange. He summoned about 200 of his most senior executives, not to Korea, to Frankfurt in Germany, halfway around the world. And there, he gave them an order that became legend. Stop chasing quantity, chase quality. Change how you work, change how you think, change everything. He said it in one unforgettable line. Change everything, he told them, except your wife and children. It was a vow, a total reset. He called it the new management, and he meant it as far more than a slogan. Everything about Samsung was going to change. How they built, how they sold, how they saw themselves. But a vow is just words. So what did changing everything actually look like? The answer arrived 2 years later, and it arrived in fire. March 1995. A Samsung factory in the town of Gumi. Lee Kun-hee had handed out brand new Samsung phones as gifts, and the phones had come back broken. Nearly 1 in every 8 was defective. For a man who had just ordered his entire company to worship quality, it was a humiliation. So he made an example, one that no worker there would ever forget. He ordered the factory to gather up every defective phone it could find, about 150,000 of them. Phones and other devices, piled into a mountain in an open field. Then he called the workers out to watch. Around 2,000 of them, each one wearing a white headband, 2 words written on it, quality first. And in front of all of them, that mountain of phones was destroyed, smashed with sledgehammers, then set on fire, then flattened by bulldozers. In a single day, around $50 million of Samsung's own products burned to ash. 2,000 workers stood and watched it burn, in total silence. Some of them wept. It sounds insane, but it worked. That fire sent one message through the entire company: never again. By the end of that same year, Samsung was the #1 phone brand in its home country, and Lee Kun-hee had proven his point. The road to the top was not through cheapness, it was through quality. Own it, make it the best. It was the exact same idea his father had carried out of that burning city, only now it was set on fire. But the phones, you could see. The real foundation, you could not. Because while Samsung was busy making televisions and phones, it was quietly winning a far bigger war, the war for the memory chip. In 1992, Samsung built the most advanced memory chip in the world, a small Korean company beating the giants of Japan and America at their own game. And in 1993, it became the largest memory chip maker on the planet, a title it has never once lost. Not to this day. Think about what that means. The tiny chips that store everything, inside phones, inside laptops, inside devices the world over, a huge share of them come from this one Korean company. It is invisible. You never see it, but it is everywhere. And in the things you can see, Samsung climbed just as high. Since 2006, it has been the #1 television brand in the world, every single year, for almost 20 years without a break. The chip you cannot see, the screen you cannot miss. Both #1. And yet the most famous product of all was still coming. In 2010, Samsung launched a new phone. It called it the Galaxy, and the Galaxy changed everything. Within a year, Samsung passed Apple in smartphone sales. A year after that, in 2012, it passed the old king, Nokia, and became the largest phone maker in the world. The world, not Korea's, the world's. A company that had started with a noodle shop, in a country half the planet could not find on a map, was now selling more phones than anyone alive, and it held that crown for more than a decade. There was one great rival, Apple. Apple owned the top end, the luxury, the profit. But Samsung owned the volume, the sheer numbers, the whole vast world of Android phones, and for more than 10 years, volume was the scoreboard. But here is the strange part. The man behind all of it, Lee Kun-hee, was not a spotless hero. In 2008, he was convicted of tax evasion. And a year later, the president of South Korea gave him a personal pardon, a pardon just for him. Why? So that he could stay on the International Olympic Committee and help Korea win the right to host the Winter Games. Think about that for a moment. A whole country quietly bending itself around one single man. From the outside, everything looked perfect, but the man who built it all was about to vanish. May 2014. At the absolute peak, the world's best-selling phone, the world's biggest chip maker, the world's #1 television, and Lee Kun-hee suffered a massive heart attack. He never recovered. He fell into a coma. He would never speak in public again. The architect, the man who set the fire, who summoned Frankfurt, who built the phone, was suddenly gone. Not dead, but gone. He was 72 years old, and the succession was not clean, and the throne at the very top of Samsung now sat empty, silent. From the outside, the empire still looked flawless. From the inside, there was now a hole at the very top, and with it, one dangerous question: who controls Samsung now? The answer was his son, Lee Jae-yong, the grandson of the founder. With his father in a coma, Jae-yong had to lock down control of the empire. Above all, the crown jewel, Samsung Electronics. And in 2015, Samsung pushed through a huge merger, a deal designed to do one thing: tighten Jae-yong's grip on the company, to make sure the family kept the throne. But this control came at a price, and the price was not money. Because to force that deal through, the family reached for something far bigger than money. It reached toward the office of the president of the country itself. And that decision detonated. In 2016, a massive scandal broke open across South Korea. It reached all the way to the top. To President Park Geun-hye, it emerged that enormous sums had been promised to a secret confidant of the president, a woman with no official title at all, who somehow held the ear of the most powerful person in the country, and Samsung's name was right in the middle of it. The country erupted. Millions of ordinary people filled the streets, holding candles night after night after night. And in 2017, the president was impeached, removed from power, later sent to prison. And Lee Jae-yong, the heir to all of Samsung, the grandson of a wartime refugee, was convicted of bribery and sentenced to 5 years behind bars. Stop for 1 second. The most powerful family in the entire country, its heir, sitting in a prison cell, all over a fight to control the company. Surely this would break Samsung, but it did not, and here is why. That name again, the Republic of Samsung. This one company's revenue equals about 1/5 of the entire nation's economy. Its electronics arm alone is around 1/5 of everything the country exports. Samsung is so deeply woven into Korea that even with its own heir behind bars, the country simply could not let it fall. It was too big, too important, too central. A company that had quietly become a nation inside a nation. Then, in October of 2020, Lee Kun-hee died. He had never woken up. 6 long years of silence. And then he was gone. Now stop and look at the whole journey. A man flees a burning Seoul in 1950, his business in ruins. He sells dried fish and noodles, then sugar, then wool, then a black and white television in 1970, then a vow in Frankfurt, then a mountain of phones on fire, then the memory chip hidden inside everything, then the best-selling phone on Earth, and now a silent, empty throne. 70 years, one family. But the story was not finished taking from them. Because when Lee Kun-hee died, he left behind one of the largest fortunes in Korea, and the government wanted its share. The inheritance tax on his estate came to about 12 trillion won, roughly $11 billion. It was the largest inheritance tax bill in the history of Korea, and to pay it, the family would have to sell shares, sell art, sell property. In other words, to keep the empire, the family had to give away pieces of it. The refugee built a throne, and his heirs had to spend a fortune just to keep sitting on it. And what about the heir himself, Lee Jae-yong, a grandson who had never seen a war, who inherited an empire and a prison record in the same breath? He was paroled in 2021. Then, in 2022, the government fully pardoned him. And it said the reason out loud. Samsung was simply too important to the economy to keep its leader locked away. Then, in 2024, a court cleared him. It acquitted him of the fraud charges tied to that original merger, from prisoner to chairman in just a few years. But the empire he now leads faces threats his grandfather never dreamed of, because the phone crown is no longer guaranteed. For years, one fact defined Samsung. It sold more phones than anyone on Earth. But that has now changed. In 2025, Apple pulled ahead. For the full year, Apple shipped more phones than Samsung, taking back the crown Samsung had held for more than a decade. It was close. Only a few million phones separated them. But close was enough. The scoreboard had a new name at the top. Samsung is still the #1 Android maker in the world. Still #1 in memory chips. Still #1 in televisions. But the old, easy dominance is being tested, and there is a deeper lesson buried inside it. Look at how this family won, over and over. The founder rebuilt in 1950 by riding a wartime boom. His son won by owning quality and owning the chip. But the family's newest shortcut, buying control through the government itself, sent the heir to prison, and a second pardon may never come. This time, there is no shortcut. So where does the dynasty stand now? Samsung is still one of the most powerful companies on Earth, but Apple has taken the phone crown, and the family has been quietly selling shares to pay down that enormous tax bill. loosening its grip, piece by piece, on the very thing this whole story was about. And that points to the real question. It was never about which phone sells more. Look closer. This was never a story about phones at all, or chips, or televisions. It was one single fight, repeated for 75 years. Control. In 1950, Lee Byung-chul fled a burning city and rebuilt to control what he had made. In 1995, his son burned 150,000 phones to control quality. Between 2015 and 2022, his grandson went to prison, and the family paid a nation-sized fortune, all to control the company. Same family, same fight. Only the product ever changed. Noodles, sugar, wool, a television, a chip, a phone, 5 generations of technology. One unbroken hunger to own the thing that mattered most. And the world's biggest phone was never really about size at all. It was built by a family that could shake a president, a family whose fortune equals a fifth of a nation, and they placed a small piece of it right in your hand. So look at your phone one more time. That small glass rectangle. It is not just a phone. It is the far end of a 75-year story. A story that began with a man running south from a burning city, with almost everything he owned left behind him. A man who sold dried fish and noodles. And built out of nothing but nerve and one stubborn idea, a family that an entire nation cannot do without. You were holding it the whole time. You just never knew whose hands built it and passed it all the way down to you. These are the stories worth knowing, the ones that are not in the textbooks. The ones the headlines never quite finish telling, but the ones that quietly shape the world around you. That is what World's Richest does. Every episode, one real story. Fully researched, no spin, just because you should know it. And this story is not over. The dynasty still stands. The tax is still being paid. And the next chapter, the fight to keep control of the machine in your pocket, is being written right now. If tonight's story made you see something familiar in a new way, subscribe and send it to one friend who loves a story like this one. We will see you with another one very soon.